Hi there, folks. Sam here, and we are rushing headlong towards the last few sessions of Capital Crows, or at least the first arc, book one. When last we left our heroes, they just decided that they wanted to tunnel into a prison with an Arix. So basically, they decided before they go to the summer fete, where they may or may not be involved in preventing the prince's assassination, they want to have a resurrection scroll on hand, which will allow them to bring the prince back from the dead. And they'd looked at this before when one of the PCs died, and they basically knew they just had to find a summoner who could summon a specific kind of demon called a Painite and use the dust of a Painite to make a resurrection scroll. A lot of steps, but actually fairly straightforward. So they'd done the research and they'd found a summoner, and they found that summoner was in prison. So they made a plan to go break him out by capturing an Arix, which they know are in the area, and using it to tunnel in. So that's what we did. I believe in the last session they'd caught the Arix. Then we started this new session, and I said, right, this is a wild animal, but you can kind of direct it in the way that you want, if you roll well enough. So we had certain characters rolling to push it along, and I said, just the way the map works, you're going to have to go one long straight, another turn, and then the breach into the prison. So it wasn't a montage, but they kind of rolled a couple of different rolls. So someone rolled animal handling, someone rolled, I think, intimidation, and then at the end, someone was trying to use navigation to enter the prison from the right angle. So they burst into the prison. They didn't roll too well on that navigation roll, so they burst in at the far end, and proceed to have made a massive noise, but then kind of sneak around and realise that a lot of these doors are locked. Characters that can walk through walls like Sketch were kind of going through each cell. I think Sketch picked a lock. Rolf booted the door down and sort of spread out and had a look. And basically, quickly here, someone being told to get reinforcements, so they hear that these footsteps going up the stairs. Someone else shouting that whoever's there should identify themselves. And someone screaming and someone laughing. Which they quickly discover the screaming is coming from the summoner, who is convinced that everyone's here to kill him. And the laughing is coming from a charming gentleman by the name of Jackson Bissett, who is from an adventure found online and will credit in the doobly-doo. So they spread out. They kind of were using the Arix still a little bit like a retainer, but it was mostly kind of just causing carnage. And they were so Francesca was trying to calm down the summoner by the name of Old Corrigan, and basically they established that Jackson Bissett had been whispering to him through the bars of the cells, scaring the life out of him. You'd think someone who summons demons would be less terrified of monsters, but apparently not. So they managed to sort of haul him out of his cell, and Jackson convinces them to free him as well. Meanwhile, Rolf is fighting the warden and eventually knocks the warden unconscious. And being the great DM I am, I then said, hey, I mean, you guys can go now. I mean, you've got here before reinforcements. The warden's down, but you've not killed him. You retreat through the massive hole in the wall and back up the tunnel. But technically, to everyone who comes in here, it's going to look like an Arix attacked. Apart from the warden, who can say that you guys were all here. Are you sure you want to leave him alive? And they thought that was unfair way to point out. But they said, we're heroes, we're not going to kill the warden. And then I was like, fair enough. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, it's not heroic explicitly to kill the warden, but I don't think it's unheroic to do so either. Because not getting caught. Like, I feel like being unheroic is being like petty. I like to be petty to prevent yourselves being captured. I don't know. Maybe I had a stronger feeling this when I thought about it earlier, but now that I'm rehashing it, I'm now questioning myself. But I wanted to be the devil on the shoulder and give them the option. At least one of them could have went, no witnesses, maybe. But they were smart anyway. They used catapult dust to blow up the tunnel at certain points along the way, and kind of being dug by a giant insect. It's not particularly stable anyway, so it kind of collapses itself over time. Don't think there's going to be any repercussions coming from this, unless they get caught with someone. But they make it all the way back to their villa, but the underground chambers below the basement of their villa. And they, arrive. They've explained at this point to old Corrigan what they want him to do. And Jackson Bissett's like, oh, this is great, thank you for letting me come with you. And old Corrigan goes, well, I'll just get it done. And he goes over and he opens up a portal to the Abyssal Wasteland. And, this energy surrounds him and he starts to float into the air. And then a demon comes through and that's the one they're looking for. And then another one comes through. Two larger demons tear their way through. And finally a huge demon tears its way through. And then old Corrigan sort of slumps and collapses. This was too much for him. And now there's this huge portal line open and all the players are going to have to fight a bunch of demons. And then we stopped the session. But next week we came back and they fought the demons. And that was what happened most of last session. They quickly realised that demons like to make everyone bleed a lot. So I think we had the two Painites, which were Fang demons. They had two Gunge demons and a Slaughter demon from the sort of Hobgoblin bit. So no kind of solos or leaders, but I think it was a Brute, and a couple of Hexers, and a couple of Harriers. And basically that's what they got in, did a bunch of damage, and I'd said to everyone at the start, just because although we play a lot, we don't get long sessions, so sometimes you can kind of take a while to actually learn certain things on your character sheet. So I'd said to them at the start of the session, remember your triggers, because you've all got triggered actions that can work with each other, and remember what's the bonus way you get resource. So for example, one of our tacticians, his triggered action is to give surges to someone on their attacks. Our elementalists get an extra resource whenever someone does damage that is either that isn't untyped or holy. So if they do psychic, sonic, fire, they get an extra resource. So just remember these things, and they did well at remembering their extra things, and I think because I put it in their heads, they then struggled to remember their triggers. But I would say across the whole fight, they actually worked really well together. It took Opalyn, who hadn't been there for the previous session, a bit of time to get into combat. When she did, she was throwing around fire as usual. There was this cool moment where they kind of killed off the lower demons and left one kind of hexer throwing stuff at them. And the Slaughter demon was surrounded. And each time it got up and started to do its thing, one of them would attack it, knock it back down. And it was dishing out loads of damage. But they were also just keeping it under wraps. And it just was this really cool image of it kept getting up, they kept knocking it down. And they're all coming at it, they're flanking, they're applying conditions, effects, healing each other. It was really cool. It kind of felt like a lot of things coming together for this session, which was really fun. And I'm hoping to have more of it in the next couple. With that wrapped up, I explained how they had the dust of two Painites if they want to make two lots of, or two scrolls. And also how they find this blackened heart, this charred crystal inside the body of the Slaughter demon, which, who knows what they can do with that. I don't think it's my job to know that. I think it's my job to give it to them, and then when they start to look into it, figure it out. I then had O'Plynn explain how well she was learning from Ephraim, one of the spies that they have met and who's quite skilled at magic. While she was working with him, he had to go suddenly. And while they're sitting that night, sort of recovering, there's a chap on the door, and one of the couriers from the Farriers Guild hands him a letter. Now, inside that letter is a note from Lady Arabella, Arabella Donata, who explains that her team have been called away suddenly, so any kind of work they were going to do together, the spies and the party, is going to have to be curtailed because they're all going away. They don't know when they'll be back. She says she's passed on to her superior all the information. If they need help, they'll get in touch. It says, P.S. Enjoy the fair, or the fete. And on the back is a poster saying volunteers wanted, jugglers, performers, duelists, combatants. All are welcome for the glory of the Prince, Lord Anso, and 12 gold crowns. And I saying basically, this is saying they want volunteers, people who are going to come and be part of the performance aspect of the festivities. And I was like, last time we spoke to the spies, they were saying don't come to this party, or at least don't interfere with us protecting the Prince. This is a little bit of a mixed signal. And they kind of went over that a little bit, thinking about it. I think they might want to go check with Lady Arabella, make sure she has actually left and this isn't a fake letter or something. Just because they've left doesn't mean they were going to be in charge of guarding the Prince either. There's still the rest of the acting school. But I think they're planning on going. In fact, well, they are, because that's what the next session is going to be. And a couple of people had to drop off, and we were kind of having a sort of post-game chat. And a couple of players were talking about what they could do, and I says, well, you can go and just say you want to take part in the melee or something, like the kind of gladiatorial side of it. But that gives you one chance. If you don't win that, then you're probably, you've performed and then you leave. You don't get to be, in the director's box or up where all the nobles are. If you're in loads of different events, then you've got a chance of, or multiple chances of winning and getting in that box. So we'll see what happens. They might all just want to fight, which is fair enough. But if anyone wants to, sing, dance, put on a performance, we can have a bit of that as well. And that leaves me with lots of stuff to prepare for next week. So I've had an encounter sitting for a little while for a gladiatorial combat, where they have to recover the Eagle of Galvinius, which is this standard of one of the last emperors, being guarded by these kobolds who are the legions, and the players are going to be the heroic barbarians trying to take it back. I have an idea for a duel. You could have a couple of different duels with different characters. I'll probably work out a sort of point system for that rather than being kind of to the death. And the last thing is this performance, which will be a portrayal of the folly of Falco, who's this sort of treachery god in Capital. And the idea is that he tried to kill Lord Anso, the kind of king of the gods, and failed. But there was a lot of, tragedy involved, and I like the idea of having that reflect what's going to happen to the prince. They know of one plot to kill him, there may be others. There's those people who want to save him, and the players are going to get in the mix with all this. So I need to work out what's going to happen with the events, and then how they end up in the mix, and what happens. This is what the whole adventure's been driving towards. This is what I've been preparing since the start. I have a lot of ideas, but it's now time to kind of pull them together into a concrete plan for the next 2 weeks. And after that, we're going to wrap the arc of the campaign. So that's where we're up to now. And we had one other little denouement where one of the players said, well, I want to spend the last couple of respites looking into this mechanical body we found. We thought belonged to this crime lord, but turns out we don't know if this was really her, but probably not. This has been made. What can we find out? So I had Sketch make some rolls, and she discovers basically the lore about the Veillock and the Steel Dwarves, and how this is clearly mimicking that work. It's some of the same things, but this body isn't made of Valiar. It's not powered by Prismacore. It's kind of possessed, if anything. And I said, if you want to learn this tech, that's going to be a long-term thing. You're probably going to want to learn the language. I think it's Ralliac. They're going to want to learn, how to work True Metal, Valiar, and then how to make these things, which gives me a bit of time, and I can look into what kind of project that would be, what kind of scale we're talking about. I feel like building an automaton out of magical metals is pretty much on scale with building a giant airship. So maybe we'll make it something like that. But yeah, that's it. Everyone's quite excited. We're a little bit engaged at the minute. We're thinking up new plans. We've got a couple of other adventures coming up. We're playing in someone's Go at the Dealing Tomb next week. And one of our players is gonna port his old 5e game over to Drawsteel, and we're gonna try and win the Siege of Trelavir, which should be interesting. And then after that, we'll see what happens. We might go on with that campaign. We might come back to this. Depends how people feel. But until next time, cheers, folks.